Why, hello YouTube. This is Baylor Mage again, and we're coming at you with a new build. This one, I've been playing on stream for several days now, and have absolutely been loving it. This is a basically full AFK cast when stunned Ancestral commander. Now, many people may have already seen a bunch of AFK builds and a bunch of cast while stunned builds before. I've certainly played several of them. However, some of the downsides of those builds generally are that you're often just walking around and like fishing for a nice big ignite prolif. They feel great when they happen, but when they don't happen, it feels real bad. That generally carries all of your clear pretty well most of the time. That's been how almost all the cast when stun builds I've ever played have worked. That's great. Gets with clear, single target becomes very, very, very iffy. Sometimes you can get around that with a cast like a Val Breach and force that to happen, but it's also very easy to get stunned out of that Val Breach cast. Other people have gotten around that by using the ring that I've forgotten the name of, that makes the enemy spawn phantasms, and you just kill those phantasms and fish for the explosion that way and use that to ignite prolif. We decided that was really annoying, or more specifically, one of my mods, the creator of this build, Shads, decided that was really annoying and he didn't want to do that at all. And so he came up with this, which we have now made and played for several days. It's fantastic, which is a full hit-based version. This is not using any ignite damage. It does not have to use the ring, and it does not need and wouldn't even benefit from a Val Breach. This just does its own damage all the time. Its theoretical maximum DPS is a little bit lower, but its consistent output of damage much higher. I'm liking it quite a bit. It is worth noting that the total damage in our degenerate setup in Path of Building is only up to about 15 million. The difference is that 15 million we can actually achieve, whereas technically I've had ignite cast while stun builds before that say they're going to do 25 to 30, but you do end up waiting around and fishing for that explosion to happen first, and sometimes that takes, 5-6 seconds looking for that explosion, and then you deal big damage. This is just an always on thing, always going to be dependent on getting enough mobs to hit you. So we've been farming Ultimatum with it. It's fine for a lot of things. It's very good for anything that will hit you. I just picked Ultimatum, so it'll work for Ultimatum really well. Breach, Harvest, Harbinger, Abyss, Expedition, anything like that. It will not work well for things like bossing, uber bosses, anything like Heist wouldn't be that good, Sanctum wouldn't be that good, and Sanctum would be actually unachievable, and Legion is also completely out of the question. So, that being said, let's jump in and have a look at the gear, because Shads has gone above and beyond in this Path of Building. So, here is our Path of Building. Now, we have a bunch of different loadouts. We've got some beginner, medium, and Giga Chad setups for 3 different levels of gearing. The beginner level of gearing is definitely under 20 divines. We can probably build it for about 13 if you're really clever, but we're saying under 20 just to be safe. We have the basic set of like needable things. We need the Blood Notch, we need the Immutable still, and we need a Storm Shroud still. We need a basic Cloak of Flame. We don't necessarily have to have a Dragon Fang, but they're also relatively cheap and there are quite a few of them. However, let's have a little bit of a look over here. We do have a full note section. There's a few things that are going to be important. One, the total DPS is situational. So we've set the config up for what you would call best case scenario, because realistically, that's the only way we can compare different versions of the build or different upgrades or whatever. We just have to assume that we're proccing it at the maximum amount we can proc it, which is happening most of the time in ultimatums during all of the trash, isn't necessarily happening at the actual boss. You will have seen at the beginning of the video killing multiple tier 16 bosses. We definitely killed them fast enough. We definitely don't have a problem with that. Even when I got this original beginner version, it just took a little longer, but not too bad. It was still 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds, and the ultimatum boss was dead. So the single target is still there. It is enough. I can't really say you'll always do 3.4, because if you go and fight something like, we actually wrote an example here. If you go and fight something like the map boss Oak, who just hits once every few seconds, that boss will take forever. It'll still die. You'll be very safe. It will take forever, right? We both chose Toxic Sewer because Toxic Sewer was really, really good. The map boss attacks very, very fast. It's always got ads in its room and doesn't take long to die. So that was our great most favorite map. Most map bosses will be okay. You just want to avoid maps that have like really, really, really slow hitting bosses. It's not that you can't do it. It's just a pain. It hurts your damage. You're sitting there doing 1 million instead of 3 million. It takes 3.5 times as long. It's ridiculous. I don't like it. We got a bunch of other notes here about like how to level. The leveling is Pox's Righteous Fire build, just respecking in the early 70s. There is a lot of information here. I'm definitely not going to go through all of it. But we also have written out map mods to avoid. Otherwise, that's it. We're going to run through the build really quick. I'm going to explain how it works for anybody who's never ran a castable stun build before. At this point, if you've ran one of these before and you understand it, now's the time to grab our path of building and just yoink it and run away. If you need a better explanation, that's what we're going to give you. So, castable stun is a very specific kind of build. Specifically, we cast nothing ourselves. Every single thing we cast is procced off this support gem, which at 2020 has an 89% chance to trigger the supported skills when you are stunned or block a stunning hit. So we've got many setups. We've got a nice Purifying Flame, Detonate Dead, and Cull setup here. That's real nice. We've got a Hex Blast setup here with Overcharge and Combustion because it does quite a good shock, and it also puts an Ignite on. So Hex Blast is covering both of our shock and Ignite quite well. It does also chill, which will be relevant later, but there's that as well. We have both of our curses set up on cast when stunned, and we have our main skill Firestorm in a 6th link cast while stunned. So the question is, how do we make ourselves get stunned all the time? That is one trick right here. The Valerium Moonstone Ring. Stun threshold is based on energy shield instead of life. So we take that, and we also take agnostic. We have both ran this without agnostic, and it does still function. However, it does proc slightly less. It is noticeable if you're paying attention, and it is definitely worth the point. So this brings your maximum energy shield to 0. Now my stun threshold is based off my maximum energy shield, which is 0. So now any hit stuns me, no matter how small it is. If you hit me, I get stunned. Fantastic. But we might all know being stunned doesn't feel great. In fact, being stunned feels absolutely horrible. So let's go into the beginner setup. We deal with that with Immutable Force. Now, we do have it in the notes section. The minimum amount we need for this in this build is 880%. You can make a lower one work. You can really make any one work, but you will notice little micro stutters here and there. It's not very smooth. The reason we get away with a lower number as 880, which is significantly lower than most other cast when stun builds use, is because we've also taken this wheel right here, where we get stun and block recovery, stun and block recovery, and stun and block recovery and regen. which is a fantastic node, as well as hits can't be crit against you if you've been stunned recently. So that's fantastic, but that's why we can get away with an immutable force that is much lower than other castman stun builds. The reason there's a minimum threshold, and for us that minimum threshold is 880%, is because that is the amount that we need to be stunned and then unstunned within the span of a single server tick. As long as you achieve that, even though you've technically been stunned, you've rolled your chance to cast all your cast on stun gems, you won't actually experience any in-game stuttering. So that's going to be real important for making it feel smooth. Next up, because we're getting stunned, we might as well run a blood notch. Blood notch just says 54% up to 60% of the damage from stunning hits is recovered as life. All hits are stunning hits. So that's up to 60% of the damage from any hit recovered as life. Between that and our recoup just up here, we are essentially hit immune so long as you don't one-shot us. So what I mean by that is, if I have exactly 6,000 life and you hit me for 5,999 life, I'm full again. Now, we're using Petrified Blood, so that'll be a little bit different. Instead of 6,000 life, you'd have 3,000 life, but a lot of that gets delayed and whatnot. The TLDR to take away there is we've become hit immune so long as you don't one-shot us. So we could still be one-shot, same as anybody else. But if you leave me with 1 health, I've instantly recovered up to 60% of that recovery, and the recoup is happening on the rest of it. And the recoup is all countering the Petrified Blood degen, so we just become what we call hit immune. It's not really technically hit immune, but we're calling it hit immune because it's essentially like, if you can't one-shot me, I will never die. Still leaves us a little bit shy on recovery though for degens. So we've ended up stacking a whole bunch of life regen. Even in the beginner setup, we've ended up with like 2.4k. That is not what it will show in game, because nodes like this node don't actually show up in game. That line right there, that, excuse me, excuse me, that line right there, 15% increased life recovery rate. Nodes like that don't show up in game. So you'll be easily missing roughly 440 regen in game, won't show up, but it does affect you. So there's that. There's how the stun stuff works. There's how we deal with our degens. There's how we deal with all of our hit damage. And now you've got a pretty good idea of how the whole build functions. Right. Anything else? The one other thing that I thought was pretty notable and pretty interesting about this build is, other than our endurance charge stacking, which is great, this node right here, action speed cannot be modified below base value, also allowed us to use something that I normally hate using, which is Nature's Patience. Gain 2 Grasping Vine each second you're stationary, especially when doing ultimatums. We're stationary a lot. 2% chance to deal double damage per Grasping Vine, 1% less damage taken per Grasping Vine. This stacks up to 10. That is a 20% chance for double damage and 10% reduced damage taken, or less damage taken. Because of this node right here, we don't lose very much movement speed because of this. Because its movement speed cannot be lowered below base value and not cannot be lowered, we do still lose our like 30% movement speed from boots, and it's like noticeable, but you can still move around just fine, and so that's great. It's also worth noting that Frost Blink breaks it instantly. Any blink skill will break that instantly. So if you need to move quickly, you just blink and it's gone, and if you don't, you just walk a little bit so you don't break all the vines. Fantastic. Now, this is never going to be a fast build. This is absolutely not a blaster build. Several people in our chat have made a Mage Blood in like 2 days to 3 days. Just doing ultimatums, as well as several thousand extra chaos. It's a fantastically fun build to play, so long as you don't really want to blast. It's a very much an AFK like side game thing. I've enjoyed it a lot. Watch TV while you play this build. It won't blow your socks off with speed, but holy shit, it's relaxing. It's relaxing. It's completely Propega proof. You can be the worst player in the world. This build basically doesn't die. It's not going to blow anyone's socks off on damage, but it just doesn't die. I love it, but I'm going to move on and play some other stuff. So that is all I have. I will see everybody next time. Bye-bye.